She was not crying for herself. She was crying for something hidden in the rain. Staff Sergeant Caleb Mercer almost missed her that night, and for the rest of his life, he would wonder what kind of mercy had made him slow down on that forgotten Kentucky road. The storm had rolled in hard after sunset, washing the fields silver and turning the gravel shoulder into a ribbon of mud. His old pickup moved slowly past empty pastureland, headlights cutting through sheets of rain, windshield wipers dragging back and forth like tired hands. Caleb had been driving for nearly 3 hours, coming back from a memorial service outside Louisville, still wearing his dark jacket over a plain white shirt, still carrying the quiet weight of names no one said after the speeches ended. He was 37, a U.S. Marine with broad shoulders, close-cut brown hair, and a face weathered by sun, discipline, and years of swallowing pain before it reached his eyes. His skin was pale where the collar met his neck, but his hands were rough and scarred from work, training, and the kind of service that leaves marks no metal can explain. He had planned to pass through Willow Creek without stopping. He had planned to sell his late father's small farmhouse, sign the papers, and keep moving west until the past became a smaller shape in the rearview mirror. But plans do not matter much when God places a life in the path of your headlights. At the edge of an abandoned dairy fence, something moved. Caleb eased off the gas. At first, he thought it was a torn feed sack caught on wire, snapping in the wind. Then 2 amber eyes lifted from the darkness. He braked so gently the truck barely rocked. Rain drummed on the hood. The field stretched empty on both sides, a mile from the nearest house, maybe more. Caleb leaned forward, squinting through the glass. A German shepherd stood beside the leaning fence, soaked through, her sable coat flattened against a thin body, her ears low but alert. A chain ran from her collar to a rusted post. It was short enough that she could stand, turn, and lower her head, but not reach the narrow ditch where rainwater gathered just a few feet away. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had seen hunger before. He had seen fear. But this was worse because she did not bark. She only watched him, like she had already used up every sound except the one she was saving for someone else. Caleb stepped out into the rain and raised one hand, slow and open. "Easy, girl," he murmured. His boots sank into the mud as he approached. The shepherd trembled, not from anger, but exhaustion. Her collar was old leather. Her paws were dirty. Her breathing came shallow, quick, uneven. Then Caleb saw it. A pale streak across the fur beneath her chest. Fresh milk, diluted by rain but still visible, still warm enough to cling. He stopped cold. The storm seemed to quiet around him. His eyes moved from her body to the black fields, then to the broken dairy barn beyond the fence. A mother, chained outside, in a storm, with milk still on her fur. Caleb felt something old and painful shift inside his ribs. The shepherd took one weak step toward him, then turned her head toward the darkness behind the barn. A sound came from her throat, soft and broken, not a growl, not a whimper, but a plea. Caleb swallowed hard and reached for the bolt cutters behind his truck seat. "Where are they, girl?" he whispered, rain running down his face as if the sky itself already knew the answer. "Where are your babies?" The bolt cutters were colder than he expected, even through his wet hands. Caleb carried them back across the gravel with the rain tapping hard against his shoulders, each step careful, each breath measured. The German shepherd watched him return, her body low, her amber eyes fixed not on the tool, but on his face, as if she was trying to decide whether this man was danger or deliverance. Caleb knew that look. He had seen it in places where language failed and trust had to be earned 1 inch at a time. "I am not going to hurt you," he said softly, crouching near the fence. "I just need you to hold still." The chain trembled as she shifted. Her paws slipped in the mud, and for one terrible second Caleb thought she might collapse before he could free her. He moved slowly, letting her smell the back of his hand. She leaned forward, nose wet and warm against his knuckles. Then she gave a faint breath, almost a sigh, and lowered her head. Caleb placed the jaws of the cutter around the thinnest link. The metal resisted. He tightened his grip. Rain ran into his eyes. The old fence creaked in the wind. With a dull snap, the chain gave way. The shepherd stumbled forward, and Caleb caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than she should have been, all soaked fur, tired muscle, and a heartbeat racing beneath his palms. For a moment, she pressed her forehead against his chest, not like a pet asking for comfort, like a mother borrowing strength. Easy, Caleb whispered, one hand steady against her shoulder. You are free now. But the instant he said it, she pulled away. Not far, just enough to turn toward the dark shape of the dairy barn. Caleb looked at his truck, then back at her. Any reasonable man would have taken her to town first. Warmth, water, a veterinarian, safety. But reason had no answer for the milk still clinging to her fur. The shepherd took 2 unsteady steps toward the barn and looked back. Her eyes caught the headlights and flashed gold. Caleb understood. She was not asking to be saved. She was asking him to follow. He grabbed a flashlight from the truck and tucked his phone into his jacket pocket, though the screen showed no service. The barn stood about 60 yards from the road, its roof sagging, its white paint peeled away by years of weather. Tall grass bent under the rain. The smell of wet hay, rust, and old wood drifted out through the open doorway. Caleb kept one hand near the shepherd's side as they moved, not touching unless she wavered. She led him past a broken milk sign, past a row of empty troughs, and toward the far end of the building where the ground sloped down behind a line of weeds. There, she stopped. Her ears lifted. Caleb shut off his own breathing and listened. At first, there was only rain. Then, beneath it, something smaller. A thin cry, so faint it could have been the wind passing through a crack in the boards. The shepherd whined once and lowered herself toward a half-covered drainage opening near the foundation. A rotted piece of plywood had slipped across it, heavy with mud. Caleb dropped to his knees. I hear them, he whispered. The words changed something in her. Her tired body leaned closer, her nose pushing at the wood, her paws scraping weakly at the wet earth. Caleb set the flashlight between his teeth and pulled. The plywood did not move. He braced one boot against the foundation and tried again. This time it shifted with a wet groan, revealing a narrow concrete culvert no wider than a laundry basket. The smell of cold mud rose from inside. He angled the beam down. 3 tiny shapes lay huddled together on a strip of damp leaves, their fur dark with rainwater, their bodies curled so tightly they looked like small shadows. One moved, then another. The third was still for a second too long, until its mouth opened in a silent cry. Caleb felt the air leave his chest. I have got you, he said, though his voice nearly broke. He reached in as far as his arm would go, careful not to scrape them against the edge. One by one, he lifted them out and tucked them inside his jacket against the warmth of his shirt. They were no bigger than his hands, soft and trembling, their eyes still closed to the world that had already been too cold to them. The shepherd pushed her nose toward each pup as Caleb brought them close, counting them in the only way she knew, breathing them in, touching them gently. But when the third pup was against his chest, she did not relax. Her head turned sharply toward the barn. Her ears stiffened. Caleb followed her gaze. In the mud near the culvert, half hidden beneath the rain, a tiny trail marked the ground. A faint line, as if something small had been dragged or had crawled away. Caleb lifted the flashlight. The trail led back into the barn, into the dark between the old stalls. The shepherd gave one low, shaking sound. Caleb looked down at the 3 pups inside his coat, then at the darkness waiting ahead. There is another one, he whispered. Caleb did not move for 3 breaths. The 3 newborns inside his jacket shifted against his chest, fragile and warm enough to remind him that every second mattered. The German shepherd stood beside the drainage opening with her head pointed toward the barn, trembling so hard her legs seemed unsure of the earth beneath them. Rain poured through gaps in the roof and fell in silver lines across the old concrete floor. Somewhere beyond the stalls, something small had gone quiet. Caleb looked back at the truck, 60 yards away through the downpour, then down at the mother dog. Her eyes met his, and the decision was made before his mind could argue. Stay with me, girl, he whispered. He pulled the zipper of his jacket higher, shielding the 3 pups against his shirt, then stepped into the barn with the flashlight raised. The beam cut across rusted hinges, old feed sacks, a broken milking stool, and dust turned dark with rain. The place smelled of wet wood, sour hay, and years of being forgotten. Caleb moved slowly, testing each board before putting weight on it. The shepherd followed close, sometimes leaning against his leg, sometimes pushing ahead as if fear had become fuel. The faint trail in the mud wove past 2 empty stalls and disappeared beneath a fallen section of shelving. Caleb crouched low. Hello, little one, he murmured into the dark. There was no answer. He set the flashlight on the floor and lowered himself to one knee. The space beneath the shelf was narrow, crowded with straw, splintered wood, and a dented metal box that had tipped sideways in the storm. The mother dog pressed her nose to the gap and gave a soft, broken sound that carried more prayer than panic. Caleb reached in carefully, feeling through cold straw until his fingers touched fur. Still, small, hidden just beyond reach. His throat tightened. "I found you," he said, though the pup did not respond. He shifted the metal box an inch, then another, careful not to let anything slide. One of the newborns inside his jacket whimpered, and the shepherd turned instantly, torn between the ones against Caleb's heart and the one under the shelf. "I know," Caleb said softly. "I know." He tried to lift the broken board, but it held fast beneath the weight of the collapsed shelf. He needed leverage. His eyes swept the floor and found an old iron rod near the stall gate. Caleb slid it beneath the board and leaned his weight into it. The wood creaked. Rain struck the roof harder. For a second, the sound took him somewhere else, to another night, another structure, another voice calling from somewhere he could not reach. His hands froze. The barn blurred. He could feel heat that was not there, hear orders that had ended long ago, see the face of Corporal Daniel Price behind a wall of dust and darkness. Daniel had been 26. He had laughed with his whole chest. He had a daughter in North Carolina and a habit of singing off-key when the squad was tired. Caleb had carried that memory like a stone for years, heavier because he had survived it. The shepherd nudged his wrist. Not hard, just enough. Caleb blinked and came back to Kentucky, to the rain, to the barn, to the small life waiting beneath the wood. Not this time, he breathed. He pressed down on the iron rod again. The board lifted half an inch. It was enough. Caleb reached with his other hand, fingers stretching until they closed gently around the pup's tiny body. He drew the newborn out slowly, keeping it close to the floor, protecting its head from the edge. The pup was colder than the others, its fur damp, its mouth barely opening. For one awful moment, Caleb could not tell if it was breathing. The shepherd stepped forward and lowered her nose to the pup. She touched it once, then again, soft as falling ash. Caleb cupped the little body between both palms and brought it inside his jacket, pressing it against the warmth of the others. "Come on," he whispered. "You made it this far." The pup did not cry, but after several seconds, a faint shiver passed through it. Small, almost nothing. To Caleb, it felt like a bell ringing in an empty church. The mother dog swayed, then sank onto her side, strength finally leaving her now that the last one had been found. Caleb gathered her gently against him as best he could, one arm supporting her shoulder, the other guarding the pups beneath his jacket. Outside, his truck lights glowed through the rain like a distant porch lamp. He looked from the mother to the 4 lives tucked against his chest and felt the old stone inside him crack, not enough to disappear, but enough to let something warm through. "All right," he said, voice low and steady. "Nobody gets left in this barn." Caleb reached the truck with the mother dog leaning heavily against his leg and 4 newborns tucked inside his jacket like sparks he was afraid the wind might steal. The rain had softened to a steady curtain, but the cold had deepened. It slipped through his sleeves, through his collar, through every seam of his clothes, yet he barely felt it. He opened the passenger door first and spread an old wool blanket across the seat. The German shepherd hesitated at the edge, too weak to climb, too proud to be carried without asking. Caleb saw the question in her eyes and answered it by lowering his voice. "I know, girl. I have got you." He lifted her carefully, supporting her chest and hips, feeling how little strength was left beneath all that soaked fur. She did not resist. The moment he placed her on the blanket, her head turned toward the puppies pressed against his body. Caleb climbed in after her, one knee on the running board, and opened his jacket inch by inch. The pups were trembling, but alive. He laid them beside her one at a time. The mother touched each one with her nose, slow and exact, counting in silence. When she reached the 4th, the coldest one, she paused. Caleb held his breath. She nudged it gently toward the warmth of her body, curled herself around all 4, and closed her eyes for half a second, as if the act of having them near was the first rest she had known in days. Caleb shut the door softly and ran around to the driver's side. His hands shook as he started the engine. The dashboard clock read 11:48. The nearest town was 12 miles away. He knew there was a small veterinary clinic near the courthouse because he had passed it that afternoon while trying not to look too closely at the streets of his childhood. He turned the heat all the way up, angled the vents toward the passenger seat, and pulled onto the road with the careful urgency of a man carrying glass through a storm. The wipers fought the rain. The headlights caught broken fence posts, flooded ditches, and bare-limbed trees bending over the road like witnesses. Every mile felt longer than it should have. Caleb kept one hand on the wheel and one ear tuned to the soft sounds beside him. The mother's uneven breathing, the tiny rustle of pups moving against her belly, the faintest whisper of life refusing to give up. Twice, the truck slid on loose gravel. Twice, Caleb eased it back steady, jaw tight, eyes forward. He did not pray out loud. He had not done that in years. But somewhere between mile marker 7 and the old Baptist church with the white steeple, his lips moved without sound. Not because he had found faith again, because he had found something that needed it. Willow Creek appeared through the rain as a row of dim porch lights and closed storefronts. The veterinary clinic sat beside a laundromat and a hardware store, its sign dark except for one small security light above the door. Caleb parked crooked across two spaces, killed the engine, and stepped out. The night was quiet except for rainwater rushing along the curb. He knocked once, then harder. No answer. He pulled out his phone. One bar appeared, vanished, then returned. He searched the emergency number painted on the clinic window and called. It rang 4 times before a woman's tired voice answered. Cole Animal Care. Caleb looked back through the fogged glass of his truck. The shepherd was watching him, still curled around her pups, still fighting sleep. Ma'am, my name is Caleb Mercer. I found a German shepherd mother and 4 newborn pups out on County Road 16. They are cold, weak, and they need help now. The line went silent for a heartbeat. Then the woman's voice changed. Awake. Certain. Stay where you are. I live 6 minutes away. Caleb ended the call and returned to the passenger door. He opened it just enough to reach inside, letting warm air stay trapped around them. The mother lifted her head, eyes dim but trusting now. Caleb rested 2 fingers on the blanket near her paw. Help is coming, he whispered. She stared at him for a long moment, then placed her paw over his fingers, light as a promise. In that small pressure, beneath the clinic light, Caleb felt the storm outside become less important than the life inside the truck. For the first time all night, he believed they might make it. Dr. Hannah Cole arrived in a faded blue raincoat with her hair pulled back, carrying a black medical bag in one hand and a ring of keys in the other. She was in her late 30s, tall, steady, and alert in the way small-town doctors become after years of being called out for emergencies no one plans for. She did not waste words when she saw Caleb standing beside the truck, soaked through, one hand still resting near the shepherd's paw. She unlocked the clinic door, flipped on the lights, and motioned him inside. Bring the mother first, she said. Keep the pups against her if you can. The clinic smelled of antiseptic, clean towels, and warm metal. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Caleb carried the German shepherd into the exam room with the puppies bundled close to her belly. She was too tired to protest, but her eyes never left the tiny shapes pressed beside her. Hannah spread heated pads across the steel table, then covered them with thick towels from a dryer in the back room. Set her down easy. Caleb obeyed, moving with a gentleness that surprised even him. The shepherd sank into the warmth, shivering less now, though her breathing still sounded thin. Hannah checked her gums, her temperature, her paws, the old collar mark around her neck, then moved to the pups one by one. Her face remained calm, but Caleb could read concern in the silence between each motion. She is dehydrated, Hannah said at last. Exhausted, underfed, but she is fighting. That is good. Caleb watched her place the smallest puppy beneath a soft towel, rubbing it gently with 2 fingers. And them. Hannah did not answer right away. The storm tapped against the windows. The mother lifted her head as if she understood the question. 3 are weak but responsive, Hannah said. This little one is colder than I like. Caleb looked down. The 4th pup, the one from under the shelf, barely moved beneath the towel. It was smaller than the others, its fur a dark, damp gray, its mouth opening now and then without sound. Caleb felt the old pressure return behind his ribs, the same helpless weight from the barn, from the service, from every place where time had moved faster than his hands. Hannah worked with quiet precision, placing warmed fluids nearby, preparing a tiny feeding syringe, checking the pup's chest with a stethoscope no bigger than a silver dollar. Caleb stood at the edge of the table, unable to step back. "Tell me what to do," he said. Hannah looked at him, and something in her expression softened. "Warmth first. Hold this towel. Keep your hands around him, not tight, just steady. Let him borrow your heat." Caleb took the bundle. The pup nearly disappeared in his palms. He sat on a wooden chair beside the exam table, elbows on his knees, the towel cupped carefully between both hands. The mother dog watched from inches away, eyes heavy but awake, trusting him with what she could not hold herself. Caleb lowered his head. He could feel the tiniest flutter against his skin. Then it faded. For one breath, maybe two, the pup went still. Caleb's mouth tightened, but he did not panic. He had been trained to move when fear said freeze. He bent closer, shielding the pup from the cold air, and whispered, "Come on, little one. Your mama came too far." Hannah knelt beside him, guiding his hands, her voice low and even. "That is it. Keep him warm." Seconds stretched thin. The clinic lights hummed. Rain slid down the glass in silver trails. The mother gave a soft sound, barely more than breath, and touched her nose to Caleb's wrist. It was not pressure. It was faith. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second, and this time the prayer came almost whole, not polished, not loud, just a broken sentence in the quiet room. "Please." The pup twitched. Once. Then again. A small breath opened its chest, shallow but real. Hannah exhaled slowly. Caleb did not move. He was afraid, even hope might be too heavy if he held it wrong. The German shepherd leaned forward and licked the edge of the towel, gentle as morning. Caleb looked at her, then at the tiny life warming in his hands, and felt something inside him loosen that had been clenched for years. Hannah smiled faintly. "He wants to stay," she said. Caleb swallowed, his voice rough. "Then we make room for him." By dawn, the storm had thinned into a pale mist over Willow Creek, leaving the streets washed clean and silver under the first week light. Inside Cole Animal Care, the world had narrowed to the warm glow of heat lamps, the soft ticking of a wall clock, and the small, stubborn rhythm of breathing. Caleb sat in the same wooden chair, his jacket still damp, his shirt wrinkled, his boots muddy beneath the exam table. He had not slept. He had not even leaned back. Every few minutes, his eyes moved from the mother German shepherd to the 4 puppies resting against her side. Hannah had cleaned the mother's coat, treated the places where the old collar had rubbed, and placed a bowl of water within reach. The shepherd drank slowly, then rested her head near the pups as if even sleep had to ask permission before taking her away from them. "She needs a name," Hannah said quietly from the counter, writing notes on a clipboard. Caleb looked up. The question should have been simple, but he felt its weight. Names made things real. Names turned a stray into someone. He watched the dog's ears twitch at the sound of the puppies. He watched the smallest one, still wrapped in extra warmth, nuzzle blindly toward his mother. "Maggie," Caleb said at last. Hannah paused, then smiled without looking up. "That suits her." Caleb did not explain that Maggie had been his mother's name, or that his father used to say some names carried porch light in them. He only reached out and rested his fingers near the shepherd's paw. "You hear that, girl? Maggie." The dog opened one amber eye, calm and tired, and let out a soft breath. It was not approval exactly. It was acceptance. A few hours later, Deputy Aaron Mills arrived with rain on his hat and concern folded into the lines around his eyes. He was a broad man in his 50s, the kind of local officer who knew which houses kept spare generators and which old barns had not been safe since the 90s. Hannah met him near the front desk, while Caleb stayed in the exam room, close enough to hear every word. "County Road 16, the deputy asked. Caleb stood. The abandoned dairy farm. Aaron's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Pike property. The name settled into the room like a draft under a door. Caleb stepped forward. "You know who owns it?" "Raymond Pike," Aaron said. "Used to run livestock out there years back. Lately, we have had complaints about noise, loose animals, and people coming and going at odd hours. Nothing that stuck." Hannah's jaw tightened. A nursing mother was chained outside in a storm with 4 newborn pups hidden near the barn. Aaron removed his hat slowly. He looked through the exam room window at Maggie, curled around her puppies beneath the warm light. Then something finally stuck. Caleb felt heat rise in his chest. Not loud, not reckless, but steady. He looked at Maggie. She was asleep now, though one paw rested over the smallest pup as if guarding a secret flame. He thought about the chain, the short reach to the ditch, the milk on her fur, the way she had refused safety until every pup was found. "I want to come with you," Caleb said. Aaron studied him. "I cannot let you interfere." "I will not." Caleb's voice stayed even. "But I found her, and I need to know why she was left there." The deputy held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. By late morning, they drove back toward the dairy farm in Aaron's patrol vehicle, with Caleb silent in the passenger seat. The rain had stopped, and the fields looked almost peaceful now, which somehow made the place feel worse. Sunlight lay over the broken fence. Birds moved through the wet grass. The barn stood exactly where it had been, gray and tired, as if nothing had happened there at all. Raymond Pike was waiting near the gravel drive, a thin man in his early 60s wearing a brown work coat and a cap pulled low. His face was pale from years indoors, his eyes narrow and restless. He looked at the deputy, then at Caleb. "This about that dog?" he asked. Caleb said nothing. Aaron stepped forward, calm but firm. "We need to ask you some questions." Raymond shrugged, glancing toward the fence. She wandered in. "I did not want her running off before animal control came." Caleb's hands closed slowly at his sides. He saw again the chain, the mud, the puppies in the cold culvert. "Animal control never got a call," Aaron said. Raymond looked away. "I was going to." The lie was small, but it seemed to darken the morning. Caleb finally spoke, his voice quiet enough that Raymond had to look at him to hear it. "She was feeding her babies." Raymond's mouth tightened. "It is just a dog." Caleb took one step closer, not in anger, but in sorrow. "No," he said. "She is a mother." For a moment, even the birds seemed to hush. And in that silence, Caleb understood something he had not known before. Some people did not need shouting to reveal who they were. Sometimes all it took was one sentence, and the whole heart stood in the light. Raymond Pike's sentence stayed with Caleb long after the deputy finished asking questions. It followed him back through the wet pasture, past the fence post where the broken chain still hung, past the drainage culvert where 4 small lives had waited in the cold. It was just a dog. Caleb had heard people make things small before they walked away from them. Just a village. Just a mistake. Just a name on a report. That was how the heart learned to look away without feeling the weight of it. Deputy Mills documented the property, took photographs, and called in the county animal welfare office. Caleb answered only when asked. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The mud, the chain, the empty water bowl, the hidden shelter beneath the barn, all of it spoke with a clarity anger never could. By afternoon, the sun had broken through the clouds, bright and almost gentle over the fields. Caleb stood by the old fence and looked at the rusted length of chain lying near his boot. He reached down and picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. Cold, dirty, ordinary. The kind of thing a person could buy at a hardware store and never imagine becoming part of a story like this. Aaron watched him from beside the patrol vehicle. "You do not have to take that." Caleb looped the chain once around his gloved hand. "I know." The deputy waited, then nodded as if he understood enough not to ask. When Caleb returned to Cole Animal Care, the clinic had changed. Not in furniture or walls, but in sound. The place no longer held only machines and rain. It held small breaths, tiny squeaks, the soft rustle of towels, and the low, watchful breathing of a mother who had decided the room was safe enough to sleep in. Maggie lifted her head when Caleb entered. Her ears moved first, then her eyes opened fully. Recognition passed through them, quiet and unmistakable. Hannah looked up from the counter. "She has been waiting for you." Caleb stopped near the exam table. "How are they?" "Better than they had any right to be," Hannah said. "The smallest one still needs extra care, but he is taking drops every hour. Maggie is exhausted, but her temperature is coming down." Caleb leaned over the warmed blankets. The 4 puppies were pressed against their mother in a crooked little row. 3 moved with sleepy determination. The 4th, still smaller, rested closest to Maggie's chest, wrapped partly in a soft white cloth. Caleb touched the edge of the towel with one finger. The pup shifted toward the warmth. Hannah watched the motion. "That one is stubborn." Caleb's mouth curved, barely. "Good." Maggie's tail gave one faint thump against the blanket. It was not much, but it was enough to make Hannah smile. I spoke with the rescue coordinator in Lexington, she said. Once they are stable, there will be options. Foster care, adoption placement. A nursing mother with pups can be a lot for one person. Caleb kept his eyes on Maggie. He had meant to sell the farmhouse. He had meant to leave Kentucky before old memories found him unpacking boxes. The house still smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The porch sagged on one side. The back fence needed work. The kitchen faucet dripped. It was not ready for a family of any kind. But then Maggie looked at him, and her paw shifted until it touched the back of his hand. Not pleading now. Not desperate. Just present. As if she knew homes were not built by perfect circumstances. They were built by whoever stayed. What would they need? Caleb asked. Hannah paused. At your place? He nodded. She studied him carefully, not judging, only measuring the seriousness in his face. Warm space, clean bedding, frequent checks, follow-up appointments, food for Maggie, time, patience. Caleb looked at the puppies again. The smallest one yawned without sound. Something in his chest ached, but this time it did not feel like grief. It felt like a door opening after years of being painted shut. I have time, he said. Hannah's expression softened. And patience. Caleb glanced at Maggie, who had survived a chain, a storm, and fear without abandoning what she loved. I can learn. That evening, before leaving the clinic, Caleb stood beside Maggie while Hannah replaced the old collar with a soft temporary one. Maggie did not flinch. She only watched Caleb. He bent close and spoke so quietly that only she could hear. You brought them through the night, he said. Now let me bring you the rest of the way. Maggie closed her eyes, and for the first time since he had found her, her body fully relaxed. Outside, the last of the storm clouds moved east, and a pale Kentucky sunset spread over Willow Creek like forgiveness. Caleb brought Maggie and her puppies home 3 days later, when the rain had passed and Willow Creek smelled of damp grass, turned soil, and wood smoke from morning chimneys. The old farmhouse waited at the end of a gravel lane, smaller than Caleb remembered, with white siding weathered by sun and a porch that leaned a little to the left. He had once thought of it as a place full of ghosts. His father's boots by the back door. His mother's blue curtains folded in a closet. Childhood summers trapped in dust and silence. But when he opened the truck door and lifted the first box of blankets, the house seemed to hold its breath in a different way, not haunted, just empty enough to receive something living. Hannah had sent him home with instructions written in careful handwriting, a bag of food, medicine, warming pads, and a look that said she trusted him more than he trusted himself. Maggie rode in the back seat with the puppies tucked beside her, watching the farmhouse through the window, as if measuring whether this place could be believed. Caleb opened the side door and carried her in first. He had cleared the laundry room, laid down clean quilts, fixed the space heater, and lined one corner with fresh towels. Sunlight came through a small window above the washing machine, falling across the floor in a warm square. Maggie stepped into it slowly, sniffed the blankets, then turned in a careful circle before lying down. The puppies found her by instinct, for tiny bodies nudging toward warmth. Caleb stood in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. The house, once so still, now had breath in it. Small breath, mother breath, the kind that made silence feel safe instead of lonely. Over the next week, Caleb learned the shape of care. He learned to wake before the alarm because one pup made a sound different from the others. He learned how warm a bottle should feel against his wrist, how to change bedding without disturbing Maggie, how to sit on the floor for an hour because the smallest puppy slept better when his hand rested near the blanket. Hannah visited every other evening, parking beside the barn and carrying her medical bag through the kitchen as if the farmhouse had always been part clinic, part chapel. He is gaining, she said one Friday, weighing the smallest pup on a kitchen scale Caleb had lined with a dish towel. Caleb leaned closer. How much? 3 ounces since Tuesday. It was hardly anything in the language of grown men. But in that room, it felt like a victory parade. Caleb named him Hope that night, not because the pup was strong, but because he kept choosing to stay. Maggie seemed to approve. She touched the pup with her nose, then looked at Caleb with the calm authority of someone who had survived too much to be impressed by doubt. The other puppies began to grow round and restless, pushing against each other, squeaking in their sleep, crawling over Caleb's boots whenever he sat nearby. He named them Grace, Scout, and Mercy, though he pretended for 2 days that he had not named them at all. By the second week, neighbors started noticing the change. Mrs. Lila Bennett from the next farm brought clean towels and a casserole, pretending she was only passing by. A retired teacher named Mr. Dawson dropped off a stack of old baby gates from his garage. Even Deputy Mills stopped once with a bag of puppy pads and said nothing about the chain Caleb had hung on a nail in the barn. Caleb had not meant for people to come. He had spent years getting good at being left alone. But kindness has a way of entering through practical doors. A towel, a meal, a gate, a quiet nod from someone who understands that healing does not always announce itself. One evening, after the puppies had fed and Maggie slept with her head on Caleb's boot, he sat on the laundry room floor and listened to the farmhouse settle around them. The floorboards creaked. The heater hummed. Outside, crickets started their thin song along the fence line. Caleb looked at the documents still waiting on the kitchen table, the ones that would have sold the house, and closed the last door to Willow Creek. He picked them up, thumbed through the pages, and saw his signature line empty at the bottom. For a long moment, he thought about the road west, the clean break, the life with no roots deep enough to hurt. Then hope stirred in his sleep, no bigger than a folded sock, and Maggie opened one eye to make sure Caleb was still there. He set the papers down, not on the table, in the trash beside it. The sound was soft, almost nothing, but in the quiet farmhouse, it landed like a promise. Spring came slowly to Willow Creek, not all at once, but in small mercies. Green pushing through the fence line, sunlight lingering longer on the porch steps. The smell of fresh-cut grass drifting through open windows where, months before, only dust had waited. Maggie healed in the same quiet way. Her coat grew thick again, sable and black under the morning light. Her eyes became brighter, less watchful, though she still checked every room before resting, as if peace was something she had to guard until it learned to stay. The puppies grew faster than Caleb thought possible. Grace became gentle and careful, always sleeping beside Maggie's front paws. Scout learned to climb over anything lower than a boot. Mercy followed Caleb from room to room with solemn devotion, carrying socks like trophies. And Hope, the smallest one, became the loudest heartbeat in the house. He stumbled when he ran, barked at his own reflection in the oven door, and fell asleep every night with one paw touching Caleb's old marine boot. By May, the farmhouse no longer sounded empty. It rang with paws on hardwood, bowls sliding across tile, Maggie's low warning when the puppies got too brave near the porch steps, and Caleb's laughter, rusty at first, then easier, then real. On a warm Saturday morning, Caleb walked out to the old barn carrying the chain he had taken from the dairy fence. He had cleaned it, not to make it beautiful, but to remove the mud from the memory. The links still showed rust. They always would. He mounted them on a wooden board near the new kennel he had built behind the farmhouse, not as a trophy, not as punishment, but as a witness. Beneath it, he carved the words slowly with his father's old pocket knife. No mother gets left behind. When he finished, Maggie stood beside him in the grass, strong now, her head high, the wind moving through her fur. She looked at the chain, then at Caleb. For a moment, he wondered whether she remembered the cold fence, the rain, the barn, the night she had refused to be rescued alone. Then hope tumbled between them, chewing a piece of straw, and Maggie lowered her nose to him with patient grace. Caleb smiled and clipped a new tag onto her collar. It was not a number, not a claim, just her name, and beneath it, his address. Maggie Mercer. The sound of it made him look away for a second. Some names do that. They bring back the dead without hurting as much. Later that afternoon, Hannah came by for one last checkup and found Caleb sitting on the porch steps, Maggie beside him, the puppies scattered across the yard like pieces of sunlight. She watched them for a while before speaking. You kept them all. Caleb looked out over the field, where the grass moved in long, soft waves. They kept me first. Hannah did not answer. She did not need to. The truth was there in the open door behind him, in the sale papers that were gone, in the worn path from the laundry room to the porch, in the way Maggie leaned her shoulder against his knee like she had always belonged there. As evening settled, the sky turned gold over Kentucky, and Caleb sat in the hush with one hand resting on Maggie's head. Hope curled against his boot. The others slept in a warm pile near the steps. No one said anything. There was nothing left to explain. Some rescues begin with a chain, some end with a home. And sometimes, the soul you bend down to save is the one God sends to save you back.